Well, hello and welcome to Weird Reads. I'm your host, Jason White, and today I'm welcoming Christopher A. Micklos to the show. Christopher's book, Ticktown, is a great throwback to 1980s horror with a lot of 1950s and 60s big bug monster appeal. He's also a writer and co director of the feature horror films The Nursery from 2018 and The Headmistress from 2023. He is a lifelong horror fan, which means he's the perfect guest for Weird Reads. Welcome to the show, Christopher.
Jason, thanks so much for having me. It's great to talk to you.
Is it okay if I call you Chris, or do you prefer
A-
Christopher?
Absolutely. Chris is fine. I thought Christopher would be more pretentious on a book title, and so that's what I wanted to go for.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I asked that because I know a lot of Michaels, especially in the podcast realm here, and a lot of them, way more than when I was growing up with Michaels, prefer Michael over Mike.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting. Okay. I have a
that
actually I have a Michael friend as well, so maybe that's a thing.
I think it is because like I grew up with a whole bunch of Michaels, but they all went by Mike, and now it's all Michaels. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a little weird.
When you're 8, you don't want to be called Michael. It's just not, yeah,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, I'm,
uh,
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
yeah, and I have to apologize because this is our second. I did go through a bit of a medical thing, and I wasn't in the right headspace. I was kind of terrified, honestly, for a little bit there, and but everything turned out okay. But we had to reschedule, and I
Good.
apologize for putting you through that.
No,
But thank you
no,
for your
you
patience.
You let me know, which I appreciate. I've been on a little bit of a media tour here, and I've only been stood up once entirely. Showed up for the interview, and they didn't show up. And then I followed up with an email and said, "Hey, we might have gotten our signals crossed." And I never heard anything. I won't say
Oh
who they
wow.
were, but I was like, "Well, that's odd." I used to do, as I mentioned, I used to do a podcast myself, and I can't even imagine doing that. So you almost think the worst is going on. That something horrible happened to the person. But
Yeah.
it was 3 weeks ago, and I still haven't heard. So I hope
Huh.
everything's okay.
Yeah, I hope so. It's kind of weird when you hope you were just ghosted.
Exactly, exactly.
So in your bio, and the bio, I stole the that you're a lifelong horror fan from your bio from your website,
Yeah.
and so I asked this question. I was glad you put that in there because I love asking this question. What's your horror origin story? How did you get into horror?
That's a great way to ask it. The horror origin story. For me, it was when I was growing up, when I was really young. I used to spend a fair number of weekends at my grandparents, and this was, I'm not a young pup, so this was back in the 1970s, and so it was pre-cable, pre VCR, all that, and at that point, you get a lot of your movies through the regional superstation, and so on Saturday nights, my grandmother would let me stay up often with her and watch these old superstation movies. I don't even remember who the horror host was, but it had one of the zombie hosts or one of the werewolf hosts or whatever. And they used to play these old, especially Universal movies or the 1950s sci-fi movies, and I remember especially just being totally into the horror comedies, like the old Abbott and Costello movies, of course, but
Mhm.
Bob Hope, like they weren't really horror movies, but they were kind of pseudo horror, like the Cat and the Canary, or the Ghost Breakers, or the Ghost and Mr. Chicken with Don Knotts. Those old horror comedies. I loved those
Yeah.
movies, and they were totally a gateway, I think, to they were my gateway drug to actually real horror. Once those started not spooking me anymore, I kind of moved on to the more classic, the old school. Frankenstein, Dracula, and then I remember the first like real life horror movie that I watched. My sisters, I had two older sisters, and they must have been watching me one night, and we all watched When a Stranger Calls together, about the guy, the classic, he's in the house, we trace the call and he's in the house where the babysitter's babysitting, and the kids are murdered by the guy who's already in the house. And I just remember being like, oh my God, this is nothing like these movies that I have been watching before. This was
Yeah.
actually, scaring the living beep out of me. Um,
Yeah, we're
but
not in
but then I was
Disneyland anymore.
exactly the old Universal stuff seemed awfully quaint compared to kids being babysat, being murdered. So it was that was then I was off and running. Then it was Halloween and the '80s horror movies, and I've just always loved horror from child on. So
Nice. I remember I did the similar when I was growing up, during the summer months. I would stay up late in my early teens and whatnot, and those shows would come on. And I was already introduced to horror at that time, but I loved that era of TV because you'd
yeah,
always at least one channel would have something like that on. And
oh yeah,
I've seen the most obscure, weirdest horror movies that I've never seen again. Or I've tried to find some of them,
yeah,
and you just don't know what the title was because you caught like parts of it, or maybe you saw the whole thing, but you just forget what the title was. And I'm
right, right,
TV now
right,
is
and
either you got infomercials on all night, or it's the same damn television show on repeat.
well, and plus you can find now anything you want to find. I mean,
Yeah,
if as long as you
streaming,
know the
yeah,
title and stuff. And so, but that time when you would just be stumbling across channels, and you might be 10 minutes in, you might be 20 minutes in, you might be an hour in, but it's like, whoa, there's a monster. I'm going to stop here and watch this. That was a
yeah.
pretty special time. And then plus that was, again in that same era, there were TV shows like. The Night Stalker was on TV, which
Yeah,
I didn't watch regularly, but I remember seeing a little bit of, or even something like the Planet of the Apes. When you're that age, that was like almost like a horror,
yeah.
thing. So I loved all that when I was a kid. I've never lost my taste for it, and I still love. I mean, I like more traditional horror now, but those classics still have a very very special place in my heart. I collect classic, memorabilia from the '40s and '30s and '40s and '50s, and I've never gotten over that.
Yeah. Were you a big reader at the time too?
I wasn't the closest thing. I mean, I was a reader, but I wasn't reading like horror stuff. I would say the closest stuff I got to horror was the Hardy Boys books,
Oh,
or
yeah.
and every now and then there'd be a ghost story. Or I was a big fan of the Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators books, which
Yeah.
um, and then there came a series that I think a house the House with the Clock in its Walls
Oh,
series
yeah, yeah.
became a thing. And so I got into it over time, but I kind of started with the more benign stuff. And then I didn't actually even start reading horror, honestly, until probably I would say even in my 20s, when I, started picking up horror. And even then it was classics. I wanted to read like Frankenstein and Dracula, and I fell in love with Poe at that time.
Mhm.
And then as I got older, even into my 30s, that's when I started discovering like the writers that I ended up really falling in love with, like Richard Matheson, who's my favorite horror author. And then later, even later, more recently, the pulp horror writers like Guyan Smith and Graham Masterton and Sean Hudson and those kinds of authors. I've really only discovered them in the last like 5 years, and whoa, boy, did I fall in love with them so much so that
Mhm.
that's kind of what I wanted to pursue when I wrote my first novel.
Nice. Now you started, your career in horror, by making movies.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, what how did you get involved, first of all? Because you had a career, quite extensively in making like, in politics, before all this, right? And then, you
Yeah.
start making movies. How did you get involved, writing and directing movies?
Yeah, I was when I went to college, I was actually a film student in college at a state school here in Wisconsin. And I had always intended to want to, pursue movie making. I applied to grad school to like UCLA and NYU and those, kinds of schools. But then late in my college career, I got really passionate about politics, as kids often do when they're that age. I had a professor who really inspired me, and so I decided I wanted to change gears, and I ended up going to grad school for political communication, and then straight out of grad school, I started running political campaigns. I ran a mayor's race right out of grad school. I came back to Wisconsin, and I worked in state politics for several years. I was the spokesman for the Senate majority leader here in Wisconsin. And then I left and joined a couple friends, and we built a business called Visuality that was a media consulting and production firm. And we worked mostly in politics and advocacy. So we'd work with candidates to make ads. We would do media consulting on campaigns. We'd work for big organizations that were involved in politics. So a lot of teachers groups that wanted to impact state politics here and then around the country. But we made a lot of ads and videos and stuff like that, and we always, my partners and I were always big movie fans, and we thought, oh, we've got the means, why wouldn't we make a movie? It
Mhm.
seems silly. We've got all this like state of the art equipment, and we love movies, so why don't we try it? So we fooled around with that for about 20 years before we actually decided to go for it. Why do
Mhm.
something now when you can wait 20 years? So after about 20
Yeah.
years, we were like, now's the time. Now that we're in our, mid 40s, we're going to actually make a movie. And so we set out back in 2016 to just see if we could do it. And so we decided we're just going to take it stage by stage. And so we are going to see if we could come up with an idea. We came up with an idea. We were going to see if we can write a script. We wrote a script. It was, we didn't have much money, so we had to like look at local cast. And so I wonder if we could find actors that can actually, pull this off. And we did casting, and we found actors. And then at that point, you're like, well, geez, now we've got actors involved. We better make this stupid movie. And so we did, and we shot, I think our first movie we shot 13 days over about 6 weeks. We were shooting like Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights overnight at a location about an hour from where I live. And all of a sudden we had all this footage in the can. We looked at it. It was terrible. It was just like you almost wanted to cry when you looked at the footage. But as I don't know if you know anything about movie making, but as you go through, it's like, oh, there's a take that works, and there's a shot that works. And we pieced together a movie that, we ended up being pretty proud of, and we shopped around to distributors. We got lots and lots of offers on it. We won some festival awards, and it was called The Nursery, and it came out, it was distributed by Uncorked Entertainment in 2018. We had a great experience, and so we decided a couple years later to make another movie. It was called The Headmistress, and that came out in 2023. And it was just a great experience. We had like the actual production period of a movie when you're on set and things are going haywire and you're working with the actors is just a ball. It's the
Mhm.
most fun you can possibly have. And so my partners and I are thinking about what might be next. We haven't really come up with anything yet. So I decided, well, we were kind of trying to figure that out. Maybe I would try my hand at a novel, and that's where my debut novel Ticktown kind of grew out of.
Lo and behold, here we are.
So
Ticktown.
here we are.
Yeah, I find that interesting. I've talked to a couple of movie people in the past, people who do movies and write books, and I actually watched The Headmistress,
Oh,
and it
thank you.
was really interesting movie. I like the long shots of the hallways. It's a bit of a slow burn, and I really enjoyed
Oh, thank
that
you.
aspect of the film. Kind of, what was the genesis behind that movie, and how did you guys how did you guys work it into a story?
Well, it was actually kind of an interesting story how it came to be. We had made a connection through the nursery with a couple of local folks who were really interested in investing in a movie, and so one of them was a co-owner of a local microbrewery, and so we wrote a concept that we thought would be fun for a horror comedy feature. We called it the Witch's Brew House, and it was it all would take place in this person's microbrewery. So we had a location for it, and it was kind of horror, it was kind of comedy, and we were in the process. I mean, we were quite a ways in, several drafts into the script, and we were starting to think about casting. And then one of the other investors texted he's closer to one of my other partners, and he texted my partner and said, hey, there's this abandoned nunnery abutting my property here in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. He said, and I think I'm going to buy it because we want to clear the land and build something else. Um, he's like, why don't you just come look at it? And so my two other partners went and looked at it, and they started, I don't remember what I was doing, but they sent me some pictures. And it was this amazing two building structure. It had been
Mhm.
built like in the 1950s. It it was just, it was creepy, and it was completely abandoned, and there were like, you know, this fantastic attic, a just crazy cellar. There were these cabinets that locked only from the inside, which we never could quite figure out what that was about, you know.
Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing. But anyway, and so this individual had basically said, hey, you know, this must have been in like February of, you know, whatever year it was. February, I'm buying this, you know, this month. I'm going to burn it down in December. You can do anything you want to it between now and then. Do you think you can do something with it? And so we abandoned the brewery script, and we started working on another concept, um, using the nunnery as kind of a starting point. And we found a concept that we liked using the nunnery. Starting in, gosh, September, I guess it was, we moved in. We like literally moved into the nunnery with our actors for about 2 weeks, maybe a little under 2 weeks. We all lived there. We shot there day and night. It was like summer camp, movie making summer camp. We flew actors in. We had actors come in from Chicago. We had someone from Portland. We had someone from Los Angeles. And a couple of local people as well. And we just, I mean, again, it was just a blast. It was, like I said, it was just summer camp, movie making summer camp. And we had a
Nice.
great time making the movie. But then COVID hit immediately afterwards. And so
Mm.
it kind of delayed, you know, our ability to do the post-production and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So it took a while to get out. But it was another great experience. And it was definitely just, quality wise, it was definitely a step forward from the nursery. I mean, your first child, you're gonna love unconditionally, but the
Yeah.
headmistress is definitely a better movie. Um and again, we got we had good offers on it. We found a distributor that we liked called Indikin Pictures, and we were off and running, and the movie came out in 2023. So we actually
Nice.
got limited theatrical play with this one. We were in several theaters here in Wisconsin. We were in some theaters in California. So that was cool. That was a step forward, something we hadn't anticipated, and so yeah. So we had it was a great time.
The in the film, the outdoor view of the nunnery, is that the same building? Because that's a beautiful place,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
it's
it was,
gone now.
yeah, it's gone now. It got raised. It's funny too because it was two, like I said, it was two buildings. We used one building primarily for the exteriors. We kind of faked that both buildings were the same building, and we used the exterior of one building as the exterior for the whole place. And it looks like this massive estate or something.
Yeah.
But then when it was raised, we went out there before they like really like developed the land, and we looked at the footprint, and the footprint was like, it felt like it was the size of a volleyball court or something like that. I was like, holy cow, it's like this
Really?
feels nothing like when we were inside it. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. I remember when I was saying when we started, we actually moved in to the nunnery on a Friday the 13th in
Oh,
September,
nice.
and back in 2019. And so yeah, so that was like it was just me and my co-director Jay Sapiro, and then two of the actresses had come in that night, and then everyone else was coming on Saturday. So we were in this big complex. We went out and got dinner, brought it in, but it was pretty creepy that first night. It was like, yeah, this feels a little weird. This feels
Yeah.
like we're in a horror movie, not
Did
making a horror movie.
did you experience anything that was actually kinda made you think, like, is this supernatural
We
or
Honestly, we didn't. I would love to say we did. one of my co-director at one point swears that he had tacked some stuff to the wall of his room. Like he likes to make notes all over, and he swears he tacked something to a place on a wall, and then when he woke up the next morning, it had been moved several feet over. He
Mm.
swears that happened, but he didn't document it, unfortunately. So I'm a professional skeptic. So I don't know if I believe it or not.
Yeah,
Um, but I mean, if the place wasn't haunted, it should have been haunted because it was the easily the creepiest place I've ever been in my life. Um,
nice.
it was pretty cool. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Awesome. Now, before we move on to Ticktown, I did want to
Sure.
ask about your podcast because you and I forget his name. I think you just mentioned
Jason
it,
Pyro, who's
Jason.
my co-director. Yeah,
Yeah, you guys did a podcast together,
we
and
did.
you guys stopped doing that though. What happened to that? Why have we not had any new episodes?
Yeah,
Oh, and what's
we
the
had a
name of it
podcast.
too?
It was called Indie Horror Rising.
That's it.
Um, and we started it around the time of our first film because we thought it would be kind of a cool promotional thing to do. And we talked about the making of our first movie and kind of talked to the actors in different episodes. And then we did a couple of film festivals, and we thought it was just so fun meeting other indie filmmakers. And so we thought, why don't we transform this thing into a vehicle where we can, interview filmmakers like us, like not indie filmmakers like who only have $10 million to make their movie, but indie filmmakers who are making
Yeah.
$30,000 movies or 50,000. We had some bigger ones, but not many. Um, and so we we were very open if people approached us, but mostly we went out and found movies that were coming out in the next couple months. We'd reach out. Our distributor at the time, Uncorked. We would talk to filmmakers that were on their roster because they were easy to get in touch with. We would track other filmmakers down on IMDb and basically just say, hey, when your movie comes out, we would love to talk to you about it. Send us a screener copy, and then we'll spend a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever, talking about making indie horror movies and all the challenges and all the kind of rewards. And it was a blast. I mean, we just had the best time doing it. Honestly, it was great, especially during those couple COVID years when there weren't film
Yeah.
festivals going on, it was just a great way to meet other people who were going through the same stuff that we were going through. Um, and I mean, it has been an outstanding, like the relationships that have still been able to maintain as a result of doing the podcast have been wonderful. When we needed to find some additional special effects help for our last movie, I reached out to all our filmmakers and said, hey, who do you guys use for special effects? When we were looking for composers, we were getting suggestions, and stuff. It's just been great. But it got to be a lot. We were trying to do it weekly, and then we did it every couple weeks. But it just got to be, we were at the time we were still running our business.
Yeah.
I was trying to write a novel, and it got to be too much, unfortunately. So we got away from it. But it's funny. I was just talking to Jay, who's my best pal, last week, and I was like, God, I as much as it got to be too much, I just miss it so much because it was so
Mhm.
fun to meet so many different people. Kind of the way I am now going on this,
Yeah.
book media tour. You just meet people that you're not going to meet otherwise.
Mhm.
And so it was a great experience. And so we're like, well, maybe we could try it again. Maybe we don't have to, do it maybe we can go on a more relaxed schedule or something. Um,
Mhm.
but we both miss it quite a bit. We both
Yeah.
miss it quite a bit.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, you don't even need to be regular. Just put out
Yeah.
an episode. That's pretty much how I do it because
Yeah.
although once every 2 weeks approximately, and I really relax it during the summer.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I'm like currently doing two podcasts right now.
Oh, good for you.
I,
I admire
Oh,
that.
I love doing it though. I also write like you do, but
Yep.
I know what you're talking about because I was doing YouTube, what we call booktube
Yeah.
content. I was doing
Yeah.
that for the longest time where you do like your top 10 lists of your favorite horror books and all that kind of stuff, right? And when I switched a job that was pretty much eating up 90% of my time to a more relaxed job, uh, suddenly I had all this time. So I started writing
Oh,
again. And when the
oh,
writing
good for you.
came in, something else had to go. And so the booktube videos have really
Yeah,
dropped off by a lot because
yeah,
I need the writing time, right? But I can't stop talking to other people, other authors, because it's just it's a lot of fun.
yeah,
I'm having, like, the time of my life doing this, and I've been doing it off and on, but mostly on for the last 10 years or so,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is,
I would say that when we were doing Indie Horror Rising, I'm trying to think, like, did we ever have a conversation where we were just like, oh God, that person, it's like, boy, that was a dud, or like I didn't like those guys at all. I can't think of a single one. I
yeah.
mean, it was just a great way to meet people again who are in the same space as you, right? I mean, the same way you're doing it with as a writer, talking to
Mhm.
writers, it's like they're in the same space, they kind of have the same, similar backgrounds often, I'm sure. And the same challenges. I mean, it's not easy to be an independent writer,
No,
in horror or anything else, I imagine. But so it's interesting to like be able to trade war stories and talk to people who are going through the same stuff you're going through.
absolutely, yeah. So, you came here not to talk about all that stuff, although that stuff was a lot of fun to talk about.
Yeah.
We are here to promote your newest book, Ticktown, which, thank you for giving me the, e-arc for. I had a lot of
Oh,
fun
you bet.
reading it, and I also listened to the audiobook because it came
Oh,
out, well, because it came out after, like, we were supposed to do this interview around the release time, right? And that's why you gave me
yeah,
the e-arc. So I read the
yeah.
e-arc, but then I ended up going back and re-listening to the audio, and that was really well done too.
Oh, good,
So
good.
I want to know because it's such an interesting premise. I said in my
Yeah.
introduction to you that it's a throwback. It feels like a 1980s horror film that was inspired by 1940s, 1950s type of big bug movies. So I
Yeah.
want to know what is the inspiration behind Ticktown, and also what is it about?
Well, so yeah, well, I love the fact that you drew those connections because um that's definitely what it is. I mean, it's for people who love. You mentioned those '80s movies, and definitely that, but I think of it as kind of a blend of the '70s and '80s pulp horror paperbacks that were,
Mhm.
a lot of big bug stuff during that area,
Yeah.
mixed with those 1950s and '60s sci-fi movies. I mentioned earlier some of those pulp horror writers like Guyan Smith and some of those others. I discovered them about 5 years ago when I read this book called Paperbacks from Hell. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Yeah.
Um,
I
Written
have a
by
copy, like,
Grady.
right over there.
Oh, do you? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Grady Hendrix and Will Erickson, and it's this survey of this crazy era of paperback horror from the '70s and '80s, and it just basically, I mean, as you know. It just goes through like oh, and then there's this book, and then there's this book, and this is the plot, and this is these are the covers. And I was just so turned on by some of these like ridiculous plots that were outlined in this book and some of these crazy premises. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. So I started picking up some of the books, and um, I started with authors like Graham Masterton and moved quickly to Guyan Smith and his seminal book, which is Night of the Crabs. And I was just so flabbergasted with how much fun Night of the Crabs was. And it's basically about giant mutant crabs run amok in the Welsh countryside. And I started reading more of his stuff. And it harkened back, even though it wasn't quite as light as those '50s and '60s sci-fi movies were.
Mhm.
It reminded me very much of those, which I'd always loved. And so when I decided, oh, I think I want to try writing a novel, I that was the playground I wanted to play on. I was like, I really like this creature feature type of horror. I really like this kind of pulpy approach to writing, and I think it's something that I can do. And so I sat down, I started thinking, well, I don't want to do crabs because I'm definitely going to rip off Guyan Smith, but I don't want to rip him off that much. I don't want to be that blatant about it.
Mhm.
And spiders, obviously have been done to death. Ants is obviously a classic, or
Yeah,
there's
actually, the 2 movies that came to mind, while I was reading this is Them, which
yeah,
I always wanna call The Ants. I every time I go to reference that movie, I want to call it the ants, but it's not the ants, it's them and Tarantula, of course.
Yeah, tarantula, right? But them, actually, it's funny that you mentioned them, because when I did my book launch here in Madison, Wisconsin, we secured a local theater. We got a copy of them. We showed it on the ultra screen, and basically the deal was if people brought in their paperback copy of Ticktown, they got in free to the movie. And so
Yeah,
we had like 80 or 90 people come. I would say I knew maybe half of them, and half of them were just kind of community members who
nice.
wanted to see them. Um, and it was great. It was like amazing to see that on the big screen. I
That
was
would
like,
be.
oh, this is so cool. Um, so anyway, so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something similar to that. Um, as crazy as those 70s and 80s paperbacks were, I personally found that they weren't written with a lot of, I mean, the plots are just nuts, and they're not, they're wild, and they're so fun to read, but there was a lightness and kind of fun, I thought, that was missing from just kind of the approach to the stories that you might find in an 80s movie, 80s horror movie, or a Them, or a Tarantula, or some of these other creature features. And so I wanted to kind of do one of those pulpy paperbacks, but I wanted to put a twist on it that made it just a little more light, a little more fun,
Mhm.
a little. I didn't want it to be jokey. I mean, I like writing. I write a lot of uh, humor, fiction humor, but I didn't want it to be like a Woody Allen take on a creature feature movie or something like that. I wanted to be a straightforward creature feature, but I wanted it to be fun. And you asked what it was about. So basically, the log line is that a rural Wisconsin tourist town becomes the feeding ground for a band of giant mutant ticks, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a small town in Wisconsin that you know basically the livestock start disappearing, tourists start disappearing, local townsfolk start disappearing, and a couple of local reporters, go out and discover that there's these mutant ticks in the woods that are they don't know where they came from, and so they've got to kind of figure out what's going on, where they came from. There's a lot of pulpy influences. I found when you read those 70s and 80s books, there's got to be some sort of Nazi involvement. And so I don't have Nazi involvement, but I've got pseudo Nazi involvement. And,
Yeah.
we're in the 21st century here. So there's got to be some sort of, terrible corporate behemoth out there behind. So I tried to include all of that and tried to make it as fun as I could. And when I was finished, I gave it to my co-director on my movies, Jay, who always reads my stuff. And I was very apprehensive, but you know, I gave it to him and I said, look, I mean, honestly, I've never written anything like this before. I have no idea if the writing's any good. I have no idea if I can even write fiction, in this kind of format. I said, but I read it and I love it, and
Mhm.
it's exactly what I wanted it to be. It was the tone, the pacing, kind of the whole thing was exactly what I wanted it to be. So I said, I definitely want your feedback, but this is the book that I set out to write, so I hope it's okay. And
Yeah.
he said, yeah, it's okay. he gave me really good feedback, was very encouraging, and that gave me the confidence to go out and start pitching it to literary agents and small press publishers, and just see if anyone was interested. And I got lucky, and someone was interested.
Nice. You brought up an interesting point there, in that uh, you loved what you wrote, and I think it's important for artists to be able to love their own work because I see too many and like sort of shit posts on social media where people are dissing themselves and how much they hate their own work and stuff like that. And there's even some people who would argue that it's important to hate your own work, but I think it's important to love your work, but be able to be critical of it at the same time
Yeah, yeah, I know,
because
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. Sorry.
you in the end, you're the only one that's going to be holding your flag, waving it, right?
Yeah.
So you can't really go online saying, "Oh man, this is a piece of shit."
Yeah. It's funny with movies. I found it was harder because we were we were working with such a small budgets on our movies, um, and even in their final form, which I am extremely proud of, as the filmmaker, you see every wart. I know it's just beyond the frame of this shot. I know the stumble that happened right after this take and all that. And so sometimes it's hard to just let go of all that. Whereas, I don't have the same talent as an author as the great authors who I love, or the great authors that people love, but we have the same tools. Like, it doesn't matter what budget I
Mhm.
have. It doesn't matter. We're sitting down, they've got a typewriter, I've got a typewriter, and so I've got no excuses. And so in the end, you just got to do what you're proud of. And I was and am extremely proud of Ticktown. I mean, I it was the book I set out to write, but when I revisit it, whether it's for editing or when I'm going through for whatever reason, trying to find a passage for a reading, which I've been doing the last few weeks, I really enjoy the book. I'm super 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 proud of the book,
Mhm.
and when when it's been when I've been getting feedback from people who I'm not related to or who aren't my
Yeah,
best friend, who profess to enjoy it for the same reasons that I enjoy it, that makes me really happy. A
mhm,
lot of my reviews, on Amazon have been things like, oh, this is like those great creature features from the 50s. I light up when someone writes something like that, because it's like, yeah, you're the one I was trying to reach.
yeah.
You're who this book is for. And so um I've been real happy, but I think you're right, especially as an independent author. It's like, I mean, I have a publisher, I have an agent now, and all that, but nobody's beating the drum like you're beating the drum, and no one's
Exactly,
going
yeah.
to beat the drum like you got to beat the drum. So it's important to be enthusiastic, I think.
Well, I enjoyed Ticktown as well, for the
Thank you.
reasons that I stated. It just reminded me of, those older movies I used to watch, at night, and I had no idea what the hell they were on the couch.
Right.
Um, one thing I liked about Ticktown is it has its gory moments. Um,
Yeah.
and I was wondering, because there's this weird sort of divide in the horror community where people seem to not like gore too much, and then there's the people who are more like me. I like both, honestly. I like quiet horror without the gore.
Yeah.
Gore for gore's sake can be annoying sometimes, but I also don't mind a good romp through like nastiness, right? So, what's your take on gore, and how did you apply it in Ticktown?
Yeah, it's funny. The gore question to me is like a really, I mean, it's a kind of a key question. And I mean, definitely, I couldn't the playground that I was playing on, the pulp horror playground, you have to have gore.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't go without. Um, but I'm a little sensitive to gore in terms of, um, I don't. When we had our podcast, for example, um, it was pretty rare, but once or twice we got films from filmmakers that were incredibly exploitative with the gore
Mhm.
and with the violence and particularly the misogynistic violence.
Mhm.
Um, and a couple times it was kind of uncomfortable. And once we actually told the filmmakers, thanks for giving us a chance to look at your movie, but we're not interested because and we were honest, we think what you're doing is exploitative. Like, you don't really care about the rest of the movie, you just wanted this scene to, like, for PR sake. um
Absolutely, yeah.
and so you know I think of my it's funny when people mention the gore in my book, because to me it was the hardest thing to write, because I felt like, I don't know if I, again, having never written in this field before, one, you don't know if you're any good at it, and two, when you're writing this stuff, you're like, okay, am I just, am I just writing nonsense here, or is this actually painting a picture? But what I set out to do was, I wanted gore, but I wanted it to be kind of over the top gore. I wanted it to be fun gore, and
Yeah,
so
fun
um
gore. Yeah,
I've got a lot of, green goo shooting out of the eyes of the ticks, and
yeah.
and I've got, intestines spilling out the bottoms of people that have been cleaved in half. Um, and so I tried to approach it again with that kind of a lightness. But I really struggled with it, not whether or not to do it, but how to approach it, and just like can I even do this? That, and like trying to and writing suspense. I found like these are the ingredients that build a book like this, and I'm going to take my best shot at it, but I have no idea if I'm doing it right. And so it isn't until people start to read it and say, oh, I liked, that you're like, okay, good. I pulled it off.
Yeah.
Um, but I think if I had to write like um, if I, which I probably wouldn't do, but if I had to were to sit down and write a torture porn kind of book, I don't think I could do it. I think I would freeze up because
Yeah.
one, it makes me uncomfortable, and two, I just don't know how I would do it without having fun with it. And you don't want to have fun with
Yeah.
that. The whole point is
I know
having
exactly
fun.
what you mean. I have
Yeah.
a writer friend who loves that type of stuff, and he loves writing it, but I
Yeah.
couldn't do it myself. Like, when I
Yeah.
write the gory stuff, it's
Yeah.
meant to be over the top and fun.
Ye-
It's not
Yeah.
meant to exploit anyone or
Yeah.
hurt anyone. It's just meant to be like, "Oh, this is silly," right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
even if there's a message or not a message, whatever,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I totally get where you're coming from with that.
Do you find it hard to write that? I mean, when you're writing gore, even though you're going over the top, do you find it difficult, or is
No.
that like, oh yeah, now I know what I'm doing?
For me, it's just fun. Like, I've
Yeah.
always kinda lent toward or lent is that a word? Lent? Leaned
No,
towards,
it is. Yeah.
I always lean towards doing gory stories, but I just finished a novella that's not gory at all. It's got some, like, nastiness to it, but it's not
Yeah.
there's no intestines, there's no
Yeah.
nastiness like that, right?
Yeah.
Which is actually kind of a first for me, so maybe I'm evolving in a sense, but, yeah, I have no problems with doing it myself.
Yeah. Did you set out to do one where you're like, okay, I'm going to try this without that stuff, or did it just is that's how it evolved?
It was just the way the story presented itself. There was no
Okay.
need for it, right? So if there's no need for it, then I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah.
But often, like, I've always equated, like, if you have a werewolf story, you gotta have some gore because werewolves don't kill you by scaring you to death. They tear you to
Right.
pieces, right? So if you
Right.
wanna go into that scene where somebody's getting mauled to death, it's not gonna be pretty.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Absolutely. I think that's absolutely right. I think whether it be in literature or whether it be in, I've read when I was looking for pulpy stuff to read, like that was more modern after I kind of, sampled the kind of the classics. Um, I found that it was, there was a line between pulp and then extreme horror, and some of the extreme stuff I thought, oh, some of this is kind of good, but some of it it's like, well, this only exists to like shock, this is
Yeah.
like, and that was like, to me that's fine. I mean, if that's the direction you're going to go, that's fine. It's not something I'm interested in. It's certainly something I would never do. So
Yeah. I can only read maybe 1 or 2 of those books a year, if that.
yeah,
The most, like, extreme stuff I read are I it's hard for me to go into that territory because you don't know if you're gonna go into something that's gonna mess you up in the head or
yeah,
if it's just gonna be fun. And,
yeah,
I prefer the fun if I'm gonna go into the nastiness.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
All right, sorry. So we're compatible on that. On that.
for sure. Now, one thing I wanna know,
Yeah.
because you started out writing movies, what was the
Mhm.
challenge, in changing from, writing a movie, to a book?
That's a great question. I think the playground that I decided to play on, the kind of the pulpy horror playground, kind of was advantageous to go from script writing to that, because when I started writing scripts, my own script, like the first movie script that I wrote for the nursery, um, I thank God I wasn't trying to sell that script because it was awful in terms of like how it was written. I had pages of like description, and you're not supposed to write a script like that. Theoretically, you're supposed to have no more than 4 lines to every paragraph. No more than 4 lines for every break, and um, short, punchy. You're not supposed to get into that, and so So as I wrote my scripts, and then I wrote, some spec scripts, and was trying to market scripts for a while, I got better at it, and I learned to write shorter and punchier, and that really helped me moving into writing Ticktown, because that's kind of the approach I took to Ticktown. I wanted, again, I was trying to recreate something that I fell in love with from those 70s and 80s paperbacks, and a lot of those were short, punchy. Don't get flowery with your description.
Hmm.
In Ticktown, I can probably count on one hand the number of like multi-paragraph descriptions that I have of like, you know, the hunter's shack they come upon in the woods. I spent some time on that because I really wanted people to feel that.
Hmm.
Or the when they, near the in the third act, when the two heroes go into the tick's nest, I spent a few paragraphs kind of trying to give a sense of that. But other than that, it's like, oh, there's, they go into the house, they get onto the boat, whatever it is. You know use some impactful verbs, of some quick sentences, and writing a script, and then moving to that form of writing of a novel was very natural. um where I think it was difficult was when I had to get more, descriptive, again, because I wasn't used to doing it. It was like, okay, this is, boy, if I put this kind of descriptive paragraph into a script, I'd get laughed at by, a producer or a manager. Um, but it belongs here, so I've just got to be confident that it belongs here, and that I've got to, I don't want to like demolish it in in the edit.
Hmm.
Um, so that was difficult, but actually, I found that my script writing experience was very helpful with this form of writing.
Did you find it was way more solitary than working in the movies? I mean, it had to
Well,
have been, right?
yeah, so script writing, the way I've done it with my movies is my partners and I would kind of, we'd pound out an idea together, and then I would disappear and write a script. And then when I wrote my spec scripts, I was just writing, I was just sitting in my office writing scripts, or at a coffee shop. And that's very much what it was with the
Ah,
book.
okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
um, but you're absolutely right. It's you know, I haven't done a lot of short fiction, but the, maybe dozen short stories I've written and had published, you work on that for like a week, and then you do some editing, and then I'll go play tennis with my friends or something. But with a novel, you're like, day after day, you're just kind of
Yeah.
like isolated and alone. And because and I don't know how you work, but I will, it's hard enough for me to give something to someone to read, so you're working on this novel. For me, probably the first draft took 9 months or something like that. It was like, I've got this thing that just keeps piling up and gets bigger and bigger, and I have no idea if it's any good. But I'm not
Mhm.
going to get any feedback. I don't want any feedback from anyone until I get to draft 3 at least, because I don't want to be horrible. And
Yeah.
so you go through this process that's so isolating, and you have no idea what you're sitting on, and that's really hard. Just to have no idea if you're
Yeah.
sitting on anything that has any value at all. So that was hard. That was really hard. At least with my scripts, you might work on a draft of a script. Uh, you might spend 2 months or 3 months working on a draft of the script, and then at least I can give it to, my buddy, and say, hey, is there anything here? And he can read it and say yes or no. But to get, 9 months, and then, another 3 or 4 while you work on the next couple drafts without anyone, I mean, the nightmare at the end of that is you give it to someone and they're like, ugh. Is this really? This is what you've been doing for the last year?
Yeah.
Ugh. You know?
Please don't say
Yeah.
actually the might be good because if you're making them respond with an emotion,
Right.
but if it's just like if it's more like
Yeah.
meh,
Yeah.
that's bad, I think.
Or just a silent.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So yeah, that was hard. That was really hard. I've been working now for about the last year now on my second novel, And it's funny, it's like right back into the same thing. You're like, okay, now it's the same question. It's like, okay, now am I just trying to recreate what I did with the first one, or should it be the same structure? Should it be completely different? Should it be, it's just so hard. Um, but hey, there are
Yeah.
also people who work in coal mines, and that's a hell of a lot harder than this. So,
Yeah, I would not be happy doing
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Oh, I want to disagree with you on one thing that you said on another
yeah.
podcast. You said that
Okay.
there's no deep meaning in Ticktown. There's no deep meaning in Ticktown. You said it was all fun and schlocky. But I found that there might be a bit of a theme around playing
Okay.
God and genetic engineering. Was that is there something there, or am I just looking too hard for meaning?
Um,
Or maybe it was just like the mechanic of the story that had to be there.
well, it's definitely the mechanics of the story. I mean, if you will believe the pitch that I sent out to agents when I read that you need to like talk about the theme when you pitch an agent, then yes, there's definitely a theme like that because I
Yeah.
definitely told the agents that I pitched that there was that theme. I mean, there definitely is. When honestly, when I sat down to write it, I was very much in the headspace of. Um, I started with the giant ticks, of course, but I also started with this small town rural newspaper because I
Mhm.
liked the idea of this thing that was going extinct and was being swallowed up by something bigger and more modern, the internet, and big newspaper conglomerates, and especially the internet is making these small town newspapers, which used to be the heartblood of communities, completely
Mhm.
obsolete. And so I started with that, and I kind of wanted to kind of metaphor the ticks kind of overwhelming society. And then I think I got away from that a little bit, and I started playing with some of the thematics that you're talking about. But as much as that is there, I honestly didn't spend a lot of time thinking about that or trying to infuse that into. I just wanted this to be fun, and I wanted it to be
Yeah.
gonzo, and I wanted it to be kind of crazy. um but obviously, I mean, if you know I don't know if we do spoil. I haven't really even thought about doing spoilers on this before, but there definitely is science, involved in this, and maybe you could even like, maybe it's a metaphor for AI. I don't know. As a writer, I think I've been thinking a lot more about AI the last 2 years, and kind of the threat that it poses to people in the artistic space, and maybe there's even some of that in there that I wasn't aware of, but
Maybe,
who
yeah.
knows?
That's
Yeah,
interesting. I never thought of it on that angle, but, you could
yeah.
be right. Yeah.
There's definitely, I mean, there's definitely in this book there is something bigger and better that might make something else extinct. And so, you know that can be a metaphor for a lot of things. That can be a metaphor for a lot of things.
Do you think that AI could wipe out writers
I mean
and artists too?
I honestly don't know like how good it can really get. Like when I've
Yeah.
when I've read AI stuff, it hasn't been very good. I mean, it's
Mhm.
been, there definitely is not a spark there, and maybe
Yeah.
it gets to a spark. But I also have, you know, in publishing, right? In the limited experience I have in publishing now, like no one is just discovering my book. People are discovering my book because I am out there beating the drum. I'm out there on social media, I'm doing podcasts. I'm going to be setting off on a tour of Wisconsin bookstores, and hopefully beyond. Um, I'm reaching out to brick and mortar bookstores saying, hey, will you shelve my book? um, and so I think that in the current publishing environment, something that's just written entirely AI, even if it's outstanding, it's like, well, there's no one there. And I don't know
Mhm.
that people will give a damn about something where they can't find the author on social media, or they can't, they don't know. I just don't know. I mean, and again, I'm talking indie publishing. So maybe it's different with like, the people who are, but I don't think it is, because the whole idea, the reason that small people like me, I don't know about you, but maybe can't get into bookstores is because, oh no, you
Definitely
need to
me.
be famous already. You know, you need
Yeah.
to be famous already to get into a bookstore.
Yeah.
So I don't know how, hopefully AI written stuff will face the same challenges I'm facing in terms of finding an audience.
Yeah. Honestly, I would like to be the ray of hope, or at least positivity in this. I don't think it can ever mimic human emotions and human experiences. It can try, but I think people are going to want something deeper. Even people who don't think that they're reading for deeper meaning, I think they are.
Yeah.
Maybe not 100% of readers are, but I think a good 95% of them are,
Yeah.
even if they're unaware of it. And I don't think AI isn't sentient, and I don't think it's possible for it to become sentient when it comes right down to it. So
Yeah.
you have these people coming out with like these companies who want to publish like 1,000 books a year. Do you really think that those 1,000 books a year are going to sell? They're not.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. That is absolutely for sure. I will say um, I read something, and I won't mention names, by an author, an indie author in the horror space who's quite popular. I've noticed, and when I read one of his books, like something came out a couple years ago, and my first thought was like, "Oh, this is entirely AI written," because it was just so flat. And but then there were so many mistakes in it. I was like, "Well, that couldn't have been AI written, because AI wouldn't make all those mistakes." um, you know, but I definitely agree with you. I mean, there's something that, even in Ticktown, you mentioned the thematic stuff. I did not, I mean, you want the characters to connect with the characters, but I didn't set out to write, you know, really super fleshed out characters and relationships. But just in going through the process as a person, as a writer, you start to care about these characters, and you start wanting to give them their own personalities. And honestly, again, without any spoilers, every time I've edited the book, when I get to the last chapter, in which, two of the survivors are, kind of, there's a scene involving two of the survivors, I missed up every time, because by that point in the book, I really care about those two characters, and I really love those two characters, and I want them to be happy, moving
Yeah.
forward. And so even as the author, I find myself like wiping, some moisture out of the corner of my eye every time that I, went back to edit it or went back to read it for proofing or whatever. And I felt like an idiot every time, because it was like, dude, you know what happens, what's going on in this
Yeah.
chapter. But every time I read it, so whether it was by accident or just the human part of you just gets into it, and maybe AI can't do that. I don't know.
Yeah. I honestly don't. I think it's important to keep fighting and pushing back against it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think it's ever, especially if we continue pushing back against it, I don't think it's gonna take over like everyone feared. People feared the same thing when ebooks came out. They thought it was gonna replace physical books, and it has yet to do that. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna remain optimistic with the understanding that we still have to push back. That's
Yeah.
just my
Yeah.
take. Yeah.
So,
All right.
Jason, my computer's shutting down. I don't know why. I think something has taken control and is shutting everything down. I don't. AI is
AI is
is
attacking.
erasing
Yeah.
as we go. Yeah,
Yeah, they're coming for us now.
they're coming for us right now.
All right, so I have a couple more questions about Ticktown, and then I'll
Okay.
let you go.
All right.
First thing is what I think I know the answer to this question because we pretty much discussed it. But what do you want readers to take away from reading Ticktown?
I honestly, I want them to have fun. I just want them to have a good
That's
time.
exactly what I
Yeah.
thought you'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it is
Yeah.
fun. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's a
Yeah.
lot of fun. I had a lot of
And
fun
I want
reading
them
it.
to look for my next book too. That's the other thing I want them to take away from it. I want them to say, I had
They
so
just
much
read
fun with
this and
this.
say,
I want to read this guy's next thing.
yeah. Now, the next question is just for fun. If you were to go to sleep tonight and tomorrow morning when you wake up, you're in Ticktown,
Yes.
what is
Okay.
your survival strategy?
Wow, what's my survival strategy for Ticktown? Well, I mean, first thing I would get in my car and get the hell out of town. First and foremost, that would be yeah. I probably my wife and daughter wouldn't be so thrilled with me in that
There-
if I did that.
Where'd Chris go?
Uh, that's right. That's right. But I would say, the characters that did their best in this one um, had fire on their side. So I would probably go find myself a flamethrower. um, and I mean, again, without getting too far along with any spoilers, uh, there's a fair amount in Ticktown that I was just not familiar with. So I was doing a lot of research, online, and so I spent a fair amount of time in the writing of Ticktown trying to find out like how one would create an explosive device to blow up a certain structure, and I always expected the FBI to be knocking on my door. But as part of my survival strategy, I would say a flamethrower and some plastic explosives would probably be probably I'd be in decent shape.
You know you're in a fun horror book or a movie if flamethrowers solve the issue. There-
Exactly.
that's like code for fun right there.
Right. Right.
All right, so I want to thank you for coming on. I had a lot of fun talking with you. But before we go, I want to know what's next for Christopher
Mm.
Micklos. What can we look forward to? You mentioned that you're working on uh, your second book. Can
Yes.
you give us any inclination as to what it might be about?
Sure. So the second book is also going to be in the pulp horror playground. It's going to be more of a lake horror sort of thing. Also takes place here in Wisconsin. We don't have any great cryptids here in Wisconsin or legends, um, but we have a few. And I found there's a lake about an hour from where I live called Devil's Lake, and
Nice.
there is supposedly a creature that lives in Devil's Lake. It is not a particularly well developed legend. It's like one of those legends that you really have to struggle to find, and there's only like a few lines here or there about it. But so I decided to borrow that legend. I fictionalized it. Doesn't take place at Devil's Lake. um, I've been building a book around kind of a lake monster cryptid sort of story, and I again
Sweet.
same sort of thing. I've just had a ball with it. I've just been having so much fun writing it. um, I've borrowed kind of a lot of the same sort of tropes and stuff that I used in Ticktown, but it's its own thing. It's brand new. I do want to do a sequel to Ticktown, but I didn't want to do it right away. So I'm going to do this. I've got another thing planned for when I finish this, which I'm almost done with. Um, and so yeah, I'm off and running. I think I like novel writing. I've been having a real good time being a novelist these last couple of years, and so I think I'm going to stick with it for a while.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for you in that venture.
Thank you.
Are there any movies in the horizon?
We're talking about it. We talk about it. We have not settled on anything. Actually, it's funny. We just got a every like 6 months or so, the people who invested in our last movie will send us a note and say, "Hey, you guys come up with any ideas yet?" And I
Nice.
was just texting with my friend Jay. I was like, "Oh boy, they really want us to make another. They really want to make another movie with us. We should really think of something."
Yeah, that would be
So
awesome.
yeah, so we'll get there, but nothing's on the immediate horizon. I'm sticking with this. It doesn't take as long, I found, and it's a lot cheaper to write the novel. So I've got
Yeah,
a couple more of those in me, and then maybe we'll be back in the movie
sweet.
game.
All
Yeah.
right, so before we go, where can people find you online should they wish to keep up with whatever you're doing?
Uh, Yeah, best place to get me is I've got a website, ChristopherMicklos.com. It's very easy. You can find links to Amazon and the book there. You can find links to all my social media. I'm on Facebook, at uh, Facebook.com/Christopher A. Micklos. But if you just search me, if you search TikTok, you're going to come up with a lot of my Facebook links. I'm
Yeah.
on Instagram, but I'm probably most active on Facebook. So check me out on Facebook. And then my website, I've got a blog going there. I've got links to a lot of my short stories, the movies, and all that. So ChristopherMicklos.com is the best place to go.
Awesome. Well, before you go, I hope that when you release your next book, you think of Weird Reads here and me, and we can do this over again.
Oh, I would love. This has been an absolute blast. It's so much fun to talk to like-minded, writer, horror lover. This has been a blast. So thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on, and thank you again for your patience, and we will talk again soon.
All right.